Howdy friends and family, thank you so much for joining me. This is day 26 in the series I'm doing called In the Midst, and we are in part 4 looking at love from the definition we get in 1 Corinthians 13. And when we look at 1 Corinthians 13, we are now on verse 7, which says, "It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things." And so the beginning of this verse and the end of this verse look very similar. It says that it bears all things and it endures all things. But I want to look and see the difference between them and what are the two messages we get from these two parts of the verse that seem very similar. Well, if we look at the Greek, the word for bear here is stego. And stego means to cover with silence, to keep secret, to hide or conceal. And it's specifically talking about the errors and the faults of others. On the other hand, the word for endure is hupameno. Hupameno means to remain or abide, not recede or flee. To persevere under trials and misfortunes, to hold fast to one's faith in Christ. To endure, to bear bravely and calmly, specifically talking about ill treatments. And so we see that bearing all things and enduring all things is a little bit different. One of them has to do with persevering and holding fast to your faith in Christ, whereas bearing has to more do with patience and forgiveness and covering with silence the wrongs of others. And so there are two messages really that we get from this. The first is that we are to persevere and hold fast to our faith in Christ. Now, to persevere through a situation, especially a difficult situation, we can't do this on our own. It's not an easy thing to do. It is very hard to stand firm. But Jesus tells us how to stand firm. Ephesians 6 verses 10 through 11 says, "Finally be strengthened by the Lord and his vast strength. Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil." And in 1 Peter 5, verses 8 through 9, we see, "Be sober-minded, be alert. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion, looking for anyone he can devour. Resist him, firm in the faith, knowing that the same kind of sufferings are being experienced by your fellow believers throughout the world." So we see here that the way we are able to stand firm is through Christ. It says, be strengthened by Christ. And so we know that Christ has strength that he is going to fill us with. He is going to strengthen us. And another way he does this is by providing the armor of God that we can put on. And we don't have time to read through and talk about every single piece of the armor of God today, but we are given the armor of God as protection against the devil, who is prowling around like a roaring lion. And so it says here in 1 Peter, resist him, firm in the faith. So how do we resist the devil? How do we stand firm? We stand firm by putting on the strength of God, by spending time getting to know him and strengthening our faith so that when the time comes for us to face trials, we are prepared. The other idea that we see here is this idea of not flaunting the faults and errors of others. We were saying earlier that to bear with something is to cover it with silence. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that we pretend no one is doing anything wrong. We do sin, and that is actually happening. What this does mean is being forgiving and being patient, and that if you know someone does something wrong, it doesn't mean shouting it to the entire world and telling them, oh, look what that person did. Someone may need to be confronted gently, but it's not something that you're going to, like I said, shout to the world. Bearing with someone is being patient with them as they learn to live in a Christ-like way. We forgive them and we're patient with them. As it says in Ephesians 4:32, "And be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another, just as God also forgave you in Christ." We can't stand firm and bear all things without Christ. Christ gives us the strength to persevere, to resist the devil, and to forgive everyone around us. Without him, we cannot endure and we cannot bear all things. So spend time, strengthen your faith, so that when you find yourself in the midst of something, whether that is a struggle with the devil or an earthly struggle or a struggle with someone else, you are able to bear all things and endure all things. If you're memorizing Colossians 3:12 through 14, this is your reminder to do that. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.